Well, VOA's Peter Heinlein has been covering the economic conference this week and joins us from Addis Ababa.
Hello.
Well, Peter, welcome to In Focus. The Ethiopian Prime Minister Zenawi, as we saw there, is talking about turning to China for its infusion for the recovery of the African economy. Now, tell us, is that a shared view among most of those officials meeting there?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Vincent. But yes, it is very much. It's a reality. As the Prime Minister mentioned, it's already happening. There was a large China-Africa summit this past weekend. Prime Minister Meles went. He met the Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao and came home with a promise of about a $350 million infrastructure project, a superhighway that the Chinese are going to build from Addis Ababa to the town of Nazareth, about 100 kilometers south. That kind of thing is happening all over Africa. In practically every one of the 54 African countries, you're seeing the Chinese investing heavily in infrastructure, desperately needed infrastructure in many cases. And what you're seeing also is a large influx of Chinese people. If you may have noticed in the news just a day or two ago, there were anti-Chinese riots in Angola, some violence attacks against Chinese. So the Chinese are here. The Chinese are involved heavily in infrastructure. And so what Prime Minister Meles is saying is nothing really new. In fact, if anything, it's understated. It's already here, not in the tens of millions of dollars, but in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. Now, Peter, the Prime Minister also attacked what he called the discredited neoliberal economic policies imposed on Africa from outside and by implication here the West. Is he suggesting that Africa should shun the West altogether in order to develop economically?
It seems that the relationship between Ethiopia and the United States is on rocky times at the moment. The United States wants the dialogue to involve more human rights, and the Ethiopians feel that there's a different way they want to pursue. They want the United States, for instance, to take action against their political opponents who are in the United States, some of whom the Ethiopians have convicted in absentia of crimes and want the United States to send home. The United States, of course, indicates it has no intention of doing so. So at the time, the relationship is rocky, and you can see the inference, or the implication, I should say, by Prime Minister Meles, that failures in the United States financial system are mainly responsible for the problems Africa is having now, and he thinks that the United States isn't going to be able to help right now, and China is the alternative answer.
Right. Now, quickly, you know, the meeting brought together 300 economists and economic policymakers to Addis Ababa to find ways of reacting and acting towards the financial crisis. Now, tell us, what are some of the ideas that they put on the table that you can share with us briefly?
Well, there are some very good ideas. Regional integration. Can you imagine 54 different countries going in 54 different directions trying to improve their economy and develop? So regional integration is a key, and there was a lot of talk about that. A more competitive financial services sector in Africa, and a more competitive banking sector. Better tax policies, letting the private sector free. Right now, the private sector in many African countries is very heavily regulated. So they talked about many of these good ideas, the effects of the slowdown on private capital inflows. What's it going to mean when there's a global economic slowdown and they're dependent on development aid, remittances, and other things? So they're talking about very serious, very real problems, and they have some very interesting solutions.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much for sharing with us your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.